Hi, and welcome back to the Bootstrap 4 project course. In the previous section, we created an online music library. In this section, we'll go over some of the basic ways to customize and extend Bootstrap 4. In particular, we'll cover off the Bootstrap variable file in depth, using and integrating a third-party plugin library, and finally going over Bootstrap's public documentation. Now in this video, we'll focus on the first topic, Bootstrap's variable file. This will include exploring the file structure and the variables for each component, understanding their effect, and finally learning how to extend some of these to create our own customized versions of Bootstrap 4. Alright, to get started, let's open up the underscore variables.scss file with inside any of our projects we've previously worked on, and this will be inside the SCSS folder. So Bootstrap is segmented into a whole host of tiny modular files, as you can see with inside the SCSS folder. Each of these files contains the SCSS or CSS for particular components, and to make things a little easier for the Bootstrap creators, contributors, and even us, Bootstrap has separated out all the references to units, colors, etc. into a variables file. And so then all the other files then reference this file, so that you always have consistent and very customizable code. So as part of this video, we're just going to take a little wander through the file and explain some of the variables and then customize them and create our own. So to start with, we'll take a look at the colors. So we have all the colors predefined here, and you can actually go through and edit these colors and set new colors for each variable, or create new variables altogether. These colors are then referenced throughout the rest of the files for components variables such as the buttons, colors, etc. For example, let's edit one of these colors, say the brand primary, and we'll change it to a nice red. To do this within best practices, rather than override the file directly within this, we actually want to move this variable into a custom.scss file. This way we preserve the original variable, and if we even need to, we can actually just delete the reference to this and it will revert back to the original color. So let's copy this variable and set it to red inside the custom.scss file. Now if we go ahead and test this, I'm going to go ahead and create a few components that actually use the color primary so that you can see this in action. And once we refresh, you can see that now brand primary is actually set to red. And again, we can actually revert this back to the original variable by removing the reference within the custom.scss file, recompile and refresh. Up next, we have some spacer variables. If you remember when using the utility classes such as mt-2 for margin top 2, this is where the multiplication is set. As you can see, there are 5 options, each configured to then set the multiplier based on the value of 1 rem, which is the root value for 16 pixels. So if we apply the class of mt-2, it would then apply 0.5 times rem, which in this case is 16, which meaning that it would apply an 8 pixel spacer value. So if you wanted to edit these, you could actually copy this entire spacer object into the custom.scss file. Just for this example, I'm going to edit these spaces within just this variable file. So I'm going ahead and actually going to copy the 5th option here, and I'm going to update this to say 6. And we're going to update the actual spacer values. So if we go ahead and compile our CSS, we now have this new spacer available across our margins and our paddings. So if we go ahead and say, for example, apply pt-6, we would now see the new larger spacer take form. And moving on, we can now see the variables set for the global styles, such as the body background color, the text color, and the link color, etc. So here we have the breakpoints that are used for the responsive column classes. The amount of columns available is set by default to 12, meaning that we have 12 columns spanning 100% of the parent's width, 6 meaning that it would be half, 3 meaning it would be a quarter, and so on and so forth. There's also a gutter width here, and this is the actual space between the actual columns themselves. Again, we can all customize these by copying them to the custom.scss file and change up the amount of grid columns we have, the width between the columns, etc. And here we have the font and the alternative font classes. And here we have the heading sizes, and these are all referenced based off the root m. The root m being 16, which is applied to the top level root element, the HTML element. And as mentioned, this is actually 16 in most cases or by default. So for instance, our h1 is set to 2.5 rem, so 2.5 times 16, which equals 40 pixels. And here we have the border radiuses for all the components that use it. So consider the buttons, the inputs, etc. Anything with a rounded radius for an actual edge. And here they're globally referenced, so we can actually again update them and propagate them throughout the entire project. So moving further on, here we have the button colors for each style of the button. And as you can see, all of these reference actual colors set up on top of the head that we covered before, and the buttons just reference these here. So if you wanted to create a brand new style of button, you could actually create these three classes or these three colors here. We move them into the custom.scss file, and when we actually build the button variants, we'd actually reference these colors here. And now moving to Z-index master list. Bootstrap has a nice way to manage Z-indexes by storing these values all together, and at a glance you can see the hierarchy information. When we then go to use Z-indexes within our components, we would then reference these ones here, making sure to always use the type that you need, and thus setting our layers nicely within our browser. The variables.scss file continues, with variables for each and every single component used within Bootstrap 4. These include the background colors, the border radiuses, the sizes of texts, and so on and so forth. From here you can actually go ahead and, as mentioned before, customize these values here or in the custom.scss file, and have these changes propagate through the entire project once compiled. This really nicely allows you to actually extend Bootstrap 4 into your own custom version, and do some really cool stuff, and making your project stand out apart from each other. To wrap things up in this video, we went through the variables.scss file, and understood what each variable is and affects. And finally, we did some customization, and extending and changing the variables currently within Bootstrap 4.